Go ahead and open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 13. 1 Samuel 13. And I will meet you there in just a moment. I thought I would share something with y'all just for the sake of it, and just the nice thing just that I experienced here recently. But I had stepped out after a sermon recently, and over the you can hear over the intercoms the singing, and I heard one of the sweetest voices, and I thought it was Henley. I thought it was her, but it was not her. I walked in, and Eve is just sweetly singing, and Joe's shaking his head. He hears it all the time. I kind of envy in a good way the spot that he has. But anyway, I came in, I saw her singing. Well, then tonight we sat down, and Nolan, he is just singing his little heart out, and he doesn't even know the words, and he just loves it, So I love that. I love the fact that we are, bringing our kids to services and making sure that they're taught, and that they're here. They listen. I have said this for a long time, that they may not understand what's going on. A lot of things that I was taught as a kid from various pulpits, I didn't know anything about. I could tell you what was said, but I really didn't understand it. And it wasn't until I got older that I go, oh, that's what was being talked about all those times. And so it's very important. I think that kind of goes along with even the Bible class curriculum that we have right now. It's the same thought process. They're not going to get everything. That's not the point. The point is they're going to get so much stuff that by the time that they become adults, they're going to know the answer to something, but now they're really going to understand it. And that's the thing. I think most of us can understand that we've been there, that we've heard things, and it takes us a while before we really fully understand it. But it's good for us to bring our little ones to learn, and it's just a good thing. All right, let's jump into the lesson. We are going to be talking about Saul's foolish sin. Like I said, we have this one moment where Saul kind of shines for a second. And I think I left some of this out because there's some questions about his how he handles himself in that. As critical as I am on Saul, I wanted to give him his moment to shine. I didn't want to distract too much from some of the good that he did. But I told you, that is short-lived. And we're going to see that. That hasn't happened too long ago. And of course, remember last time we talked about the fact that, Samuel gets up and says, now remember this? Remember that you wanted a king? You remember that? Well, now you've got a king. I'm transferring my leadership here to him. It is all you, buddy. This is all you. And now he just hands it over. Now, all that being said, let's jump into chapter 13. Let's look at the first 4 verses together. This is Jonathan's victory here. Saul was 40 years old when he began to reign, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, whereof 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash, and in the mount of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin, and the rest of the people he sent every man to his tent. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. And all Israel heard say that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel was had in abomination with the Philistines, and the people were gathered together after Saul to Gilgal. So let's think about some things here. So the first thing to point out is, of course, you got Jonathan's victory here. But if you're reading along in some of your translations, let me help out with a little bit of something here. There is a difficulty here in translation in verse 1. If you have something other than the American Standard says that Saul was 40 years old when he began to reign. And this is kind of pieced together because if you look in the American Standard Version, 40 is italicized. If you recall back to Brother Grounds' lessons on the Bible and what all these things mean, the italicized means it's not there. Well, if we go and we look at various passages of Scripture, if you go into Acts, I believe it's chapter 14, you're going to find that there's a reference to Saul's reign. And that's probably where we're getting this number 40. Also, we realize, too, that Saul doesn't, he's not, it's never mentioned anything about Saul having a family when he becomes king. It's thought that he's pretty young. The idea is it's probably been 20 years here since everything has started. Now, all that being said, when you look at your translations, I think some of them say Saul reigned 1 year, and when he reigned 2, I think is what it says in some translations, maybe the King James, New King James. But the idea is some time has passed, okay? And we don't really understand this translation is so difficult, but it is certain that the case that in Acts we see that he ruled 40 years. And it looks like this initially has been at least 20 years. Clearly some time has passed because Saul now has a son by the name of Jonathan. This is the first time he's mentioned. It's just kind of thrown in there. It's not doesn't say anything. Just all of a sudden, verse 2, Jonathan. Jonathan is here. Nothing is said prior to this. Now, in verse 2, we see that after he had reigned a couple of years here, Saul made an army of 3,000 men, 2,000 of which were with him in Michmash. Now, Jonathan has this great victory, and it says, verse 3, Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines heard of it, so they heard what was going on. And so Saul then warns the people. He sends out this proclamation. Now, I've read a few different things on what people are thinking about this, but really, I think it just boils down to one simple thing, okay? He is concerned for the people that the Philistines, they have heard about this, and that they are going to retaliate. That's clearly what we're seeing here in the Scriptures. And so he's saying, look, the Philistines have heard of it, so Saul, then he blows the trumpet, he tells everybody about this and says, let the Hebrews hear this. So all of Israel is supposed to hear this. And all Israel heard say that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had an abomination with the Philistines. So moving on here. Let's look at this next part. I've kind of these titles here, they kind of just tell you what's going on. That's all I'm trying to do here, trying to explain some things. I know that this one's just pretty evident here, but, Saul's army is afraid. Let's look at verses 5 through 7. 5 through 7. And the Philistines assembled themselves together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and encamped in Michmash eastward of Bethaven. Now, I'm going to stop right there just so that we have a clear picture of what's going on as we're reading through. But do you recall what I just said about the army that was with Saul? It wasn't 30,000 chariots. It wasn't 6,000 horsemen. That's what the Philistines have. And then it says that they've got so many people out there, all the footmen, that it looks like it's the sand of the sea. There's a lot of people there. They can't even count them is the idea. That's the thought process. Anytime you see that, can you count the sand? No, you can't count the sand. You can't count these men. But amongst them, you can count the 30,000 chariots and the 6,000 horsemen, and that is enough in and of itself to make a regular army of 6,000 or 3,000 to be concerned. Now, here's the problem with all of this, and that we need to kind of answer here before we move on, is that what has happened in the past? I mean, when you think about some of the things that have already happened in this Hebrew history, and you had these insurmountable odds, yet God is on your side, what happens? you're victorious. But what happens here? Well, let's see. Verse 6, when the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were distressed, then the people did hide themselves in caves and in thickets and in rocks and in coverts and in pits. Now, I'm not going to go jumping ahead, but in chapter 14, the Philistines make fun of them for this. They say, oh, look, they came out of the rocks. They came out of their hiding spots. And so they know that this is going on. All the people are fleeing, and the Philistines end up making fun of them for this later. But they go and they hide themselves. Verse 7, now some of the Hebrews had gone over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. But as for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Now, here is the thing. They are running and hiding, and then there's something kind of subtle going on here, and if you just read quickly through it, then you don't see it. But why are the people trembling? Well, we see out throughout the rest of this context that Saul is kind of afraid. Matter of fact, in just a few moments that we're going to talk about, his army starts to slip away from him, which causes him to do things because he's doing it out of fear. He's doing things because he's afraid. Now, he can even furthermore go to say, well, look, you know what? If you've got a strong leader, what's going to happen? There are people out there that you would follow anywhere, aren't there? There are, I can think back to times, hunting season is upon us, and I've had people talk to me, and I'm sure some of you guys have hunted by yourselves. I do that quite a lot, hunting by myself rather than with people. But somebody go, well, aren't you afraid to go out into the dark woods by yourself? And I go, I've got a few weapons on me. I'm pretty good. I'm not really that concerned. But if you have ever gone out in the woods when you were a child and it's dark, but you had your dad there, did you feel a little bit better? You might have been scared, but you thought, you know what? If a bear came out of this woods, my dad, he'd probably take him. That's what your kid was thinking, right? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay when I'm with Dad. Why? Because when you look at someone as a strong leader, and that's what you do as a child. You look to your dad as a strong leader. When you look at him like that, when people look to strong leaders, you go, we've got this. We've got this. But that's not what they do. They're all afraid. Matter of fact, the positioning that we're seeing throughout this is somewhat of a retreat, and they're going to put themselves on the other side of the Jordan. That's what we're seeing here. But Saul is also afraid. But I want to make this point here. And I really meant to put this on a PowerPoint so that you could have it and jot it down really quickly. But Saul continuously fears the wrong things. Right now, he should just put his trust in God. God has done this over and over again. There is no reason to doubt that God can take care of you at this moment. There's no reason to be afraid here because you've got God on your side. Now, Saul fears the wrong things, like we've mentioned before. He fears, here in chapter 13, he fears the Philistine hordes. In chapter 10, he feared becoming a king. In chapter 15, he fears his own army. In chapter 17, he fears Goliath. Chapter 18, he fears David. David doesn't want to harm him, and you can go on and talk about that for a long time. In chapter 22, he feels like there's going to be an insurrection. He fears that, but there's no danger of that. And then in chapter 28, Saul fears the prophecy of his own death, even though he can't do anything about it. Saul fears the wrong things. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He is just always fearing the wrong thing. And so, as we look at all this, Saul's army is afraid ultimately because Saul is afraid. Saul looks at this and he sees insurmountable odds and sees no way of being able to come out of this. All right, let's look at the next part. Saul's wickedness. Starting in verse 15, or start verse 8, going through the first part of 15. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, Bring hither the burnt offering to me and the peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, What hast thou done? And Saul said, Because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines assembled themselves together at Michmash. Therefore said I, Now will the Philistines come down upon me to Gilgal, and I have not entreated the favor of Jehovah. I forced myself, therefore, and offered the burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of Jehovah thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would Jehovah have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. Jehovah hath sought him a man after his own heart, and Jehovah hath appointed him to be prince over his people, because thou hast not kept that which Jehovah commanded thee. And Samuel arose and gat him up from Gilgal unto Gibeah of Benjamin. All right, we'll stop right there. All right, so just to recap what's happened. Saul, of course, he's waiting on Samuel. Now, some people go back to chapter 10 and talk about how Samuel said that he would come after 7 days. I don't think that this is the same event. This clearly cannot be the same event to me. It looks like years have passed since then. This is not the same thing. But all that being said, there was a time that he was supposed to wait. He knew it. He knew what he was supposed to do. But he's waiting on Samuel, and the people start to, it says here in the American Standard, I'm not sure what all the rest of the translations say. It says in the American Standard that they were scattered, they were gone away. But the idea in the Hebrew is that they're dispersed. They are leaving. They are, and I even saw one reference to slipping away. They're slipping away. So all these people are getting out of Dodge. These are the soldiers that are supposed to be fighting with Saul, and they're leaving him. They're leaving. Now, they've been with him up to this point, and now they're going, no, this guy doesn't have it together. We got to get out of here and keep ourselves alive. So as Saul is seeing that everybody's dispersing from him, he then decides, you know what, I'm waiting on this offering. I'm waiting on these sacrifices that Samuel's supposed to come and do. But he hasn't made it yet. And of course, we know the story here. This is one thing that we know very well. He goes, I'm going to do it on my own. And then he does it. I'm going to offer these burnt offerings. And then it looks like verse 10, right after he does it, I mean, this is the end. It says it gives the idea that this is immediately afterward that, Samuel arrives. And as he does, the kind of thing that you get in verses 11 and 12 is, what did you do? What were you thinking? And so, verses 11 and 12, he says, What hast thou done? And Saul said, Because I saw the people were scattered from me. And here, listen to what he says. And thou camest not within the days appointed. But he's there, right? He's there now. Came not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines assembled themselves together at Michmash. So they're coming to fight me. What am I supposed to do? I've got to go and take care of this. And said, Therefore said I, now the Philistines come down upon me from Gilgal, and I have not entreated the favor of Jehovah. And then he says this, I forced myself, therefore, and offered the burnt offering. The whole time, he's just blaming Samuel. You did not show up on time. You didn't show up on time. I had to do something, and so, I entreated Jehovah, but I had to force myself to do that. I had to make I hated to do that, but that's what I had to do. And what does Samuel do? Oh, It's okay, Saul. We love you, man. Man, we love you. You're such a great king. Look, it's no big deal. Is that what he does? No. No, he doesn't. This is a big deal. Look at this. Verses 13 through 15. And Samuel said to Saul, "Thou hast done foolishly." This is the wrong thing to do. You have done foolishly. This is absolutely wrong. It says, "Thou hast not kept the commandment of Jehovah thy God." So you've dealt falsely here. You have not kept Jehovah's commandment. And it says, "Which he commanded thee, for now would Jehovah have established the kingdom upon Israel forever." So if you had just done the right thing, everything that you would have done would have succeeded. But you haven't done the right thing. And so now that your kingdom, it's departed. It's over. Now, I love this when you know the rest of the story here. That's what I love about the Bible, because when you're reading through and you've studied something so many times and you've read through, you know what's happening. You know what's going to happen. But I love the way that it's put in verse 14. He says, "Now thy kingdom shall not continue. And Jehovah hath sought him a man." How? After his own heart. So, right here is a reference already to David. And we already know the end of his story, right? But Jehovah has already found a man after his own heart. And that man certainly isn't Saul. Saul has not dealt right with the Lord. All right, one more section of Scripture here, and let's make a few points of application. Let's look at the Israelites' army's weakness. Verses 15b on, it says, "And Saul numbered the people that were present with him, about 600 men. And Saul and Jonathan his son, and the people that were present with them abode in Geba of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash. And the spoilers came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. 1 company turned unto the way that leadeth to Ophrah, and unto the land of Shual. And another company turned away to Beth Horon, and another company turned the way of the border that looketh down upon the valley of Zeboim, toward the wilderness. Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel. For the Philistines said, Lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share, in his coulter, and his axe, and his mattock. Yet they had a file for the mattocks, and for the coulters, and for the forks, and for the axes, and to set the goads. So it came to pass in the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan, but with Saul and with Jonathan his own son was there found. And the garrison of the Philistines went out unto the pass of Michmash. Okay, so all that is being said here. Look at verse 15. The end of verse 15. There are only 600 men left. There were 3,000 in the beginning. Now there's only 600 left. Only 600 men left. Now, when you think about this, well, Gideon had a few less, right? And Gideon was able to make havoc with less than what he has here. But when you look at this, he has 600 men, and the armies here. They're looking at the armies, and they are going out and making spoil of all these different places. And they've gone out into different companies towards different cities. And the Philistines, you see in verse 19. Now, here is something that you just go, what were you thinking? Again, here is Saul, just such an excellent king here, okay? Let's talk about how excellent Saul is as a king. What has he been doing for years? He's been allowing them to basically be enslaved by the Philistines. How? The Philistines have all the metalworks. It says, look at this, verse 19 and 20. It says, Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. So the Philistines aren't allowing them to make anything. And even if they want to go and sharpen the things that they need to farm with, guess where they have to go? They have to go to the Philistines. The Philistines have basically subjugated them without really subjugating them. They're basically making it impossible for them to rise up against them. Nobody can work with metal here. And so then we get down to verse 22 and we find out that nobody had any formal weapons except for Saul and Jonathan. Nobody else has anything. Now, matter of fact, Shamgar is mentioned as earlier in the scriptures as having killed somebody with an ox's goad. That's the kind of things you hear. I don't know if you have heard some of the history of this, but a lot of the, I believe it was the Japanese weapons that they had, were made out of things that they used in farming, because they didn't actually have a whole lot of, they weren't allowed to make their own weapons, and so they had pitchforks and they had these gardening tools that they learned how to use, and they used them, really, really well, to the point that they became weapons in ways. And so all that being said, that's what's going on here. The children of Israel don't have any weapons except for Saul and Jonathan, and that's it. Everybody else, when you think about this, and you think about, when you start off, think about, he has 3,000 men, and you're thinking, well, here's 3,000 men that are fighting. You're thinking about soldiers and armor and whatnot. They probably look like just a ragtag group of people walking around with a bunch of, pruning forks and things. This is just, kind of a crazy thought to us, but that's what it is. They are not prepared here. All right, let's make some application fairly quickly here. Here's the first thing here. If God be for us, who can be against us? Of course, you go to Romans chapter 8 and you can see some of this stuff. But when you think about this, if God be for us, who can be against us? This has been shown over and over again throughout the Old Testament up to this point. That God is on your side. You don't need to worry about anything. Who would have thought that you could go to Jericho and just march around that thing a total of 13 times, and at the end you yell, and then the walls come down? Who would have thought? Nobody. No, matter of fact, when they're doing that, the people in Jericho are just taunting them. Are you kidding me? You're going to walk around again? But with God, it was possible. You can go from scenario to scenario throughout the Old Testament, especially during these times when Joshua was alive, and you see them fighting. And they're fighting people that really, in essence, they have no business going up against. And yet, God delivers every single time. We need to be on the right side of things, and that's always going to be on God's side. But a part of this, as we see with Saul, is you have to be faithful. You have to be faithful to him to do that. Number 2, leaders need to be strong. This is there's it's a sad thing when you look at any kind of leadership, whether it's in government or the church, whatever. When you see weak men leading, it does not make for strong people to follow, right? Whenever you've got somebody who's weak leading, what does that make the people want to do? Let's find us somebody strong to lead us. We can't walk around with this. Now, of course, I think about this in the church, and we need strong leaders in the church. People are going to stand the ground. They're going to stand on the truth, and that should be the goal of every eldership, to be a strong eldership, strong biblically, and so that's what we should all strive for. And then, of course, when you have strong leadership, You have strong followers. And so that's what we're looking for in every congregation of the Lord's church. Number 3, disobedience is never acceptable. You can go back to verses 11 and 12. Saul, I forced myself to do this. Oh, man, he does this again. He just keeps doing this. He makes up excuses. To me, Saul sounds like a child. Oh, well, this was really the way to go. I thought that this was the right thing. Yeah, right. You thought that was the right thing. That if God says specifically to do this, or God's man says specifically to do this, and you don't do that, there's no way that you should have ever thought that was okay. And yet, that's what he does. Disobedience is never, ever acceptable. And then, last but not least, I think about this one, you have to be prepared. They weren't prepared for this. They weren't prepared at all. They've got this kingdom going for a while, and nobody has any weapons. Nobody has them. So, why? Why? I mean, Saul should have day one said, okay, I've got an army. Now, I've got to be making sure that they've got weapons. Maybe he was concerned with food, and, we don't know all the ins and outs of this, but the fact that they didn't have weapons means, guess what? You don't have an army. You don't have an army without weapons. Where are you going to go over there and, talk them to death? You can't do that. That's not what's going to happen. And so they aren't prepared. They aren't prepared. Well, you know what? When it comes down to it, brethren, we better be prepared. Now, we need to be prepared in many ways. I think about the fact that we need to be studying our scriptures and to make sure that whenever somebody comes up to us with a question, we'll be able to answer it, or if someone needs some guidance, we'll be able to give it to them. And so we need to do that. But then I think also we need to be prepared for the end. And I think that that's something that everybody knows here. But we need to be prepared for the day that we no longer have any more days. And we don't know when that day will come. And we don't know if how many more days will be until that point. And so we better make sure that we are ready right now. Because it could be the case that if we leave this place tonight, that one of two things could happen. We could leave this place and this could be the last time we see our brethren here. It could be the fact that we leave and somehow our lives are taken from us in some sort of way. That could have happened to any one of us tonight. Furthermore, we don't know when the Lord's going to come back, and you better be ready for that. And so, either way, you need to make sure that you're a Christian, that you hear, believe, repent, confess, and are baptized into Christ. And if you need some help in understanding that fully, we'd be glad to sit down with you. If you've already done that, you need to make sure that you're faithful. Be faithful unto death, and thou shalt receive a crown of life. The invitation is yours. Please come as we stand and as we sing.